Nvidia. Right now, they are the undisputed king of the AI revolution. I mean, they're powering literally everything from ChatGPT to the next generation of self-driving cars. But just as they're sitting at the absolute peak of their power, the company is staring down its greatest challenge yet. It's this perilous geopolitical gauntlet, and its entire future in the massive Chinese market is hanging in the balance. All right, let's get right into it. So what's with this number? $4.5 billion. Well, that is the staggering charge Nvidia had to take in a single quarter. Why? All because of U.S. export restrictions on just one of its advanced AI chips that was supposed to go to China. It's a gut punch of a figure, and it tells you everything you need to know. This is no longer just about business as usual. And that's the heart of the issue, really. Nvidia is caught smack in the middle of a high-stakes chess match between Washington and Beijing. The company's success, its profits, its very ability to sell in one of its biggest markets, none of that is being decided by innovation anymore. It's all being dictated by the strategic moves of two global superpowers. So let's break this down. First, let's look at the pressure coming from Washington. And you gotta understand, this isn't just one rule change. This has been a systematic tightening of the screws on what American tech companies are even allowed to sell to China. You can see how this has played out. It really started ramping up in October 2022 with these huge, sweeping restrictions on advanced chips. A year later, bam, the rules get even tighter. Then, by late 2024, the US government extended its reach to cover even foreign-made products if they use American tech. And then things got really weird. In July 2025, a ban on Nvidia's special China-only H20 chip was suddenly reversed, but it came with a very, very expensive catch. And this was the catch. In order to get the license to start selling its H2O chip in China again, Nvidia had to agree to something unprecedented. They have to pay a 15% royalty on that revenue directly to the US Treasury. So let that sink in. This isn't some one-time fine. It's a permanent financial headwind, basically turning a slice of Nvidia's business into a direct payment to the US government. The financial damage from all this has been just staggering. You've got that initial $4.5 billion charge we talked about, but then the company was bracing for another potential $8 billion in losses. On top of that, they had to write down $5.5 billion in inventory they just couldn't sell anymore. It's this cascade of financial pain that led Nvidia, in their own words, to call this a permanent loss of opportunities. But, this is absolutely not a one-sided story. Beijing hasn't just been sitting back and taking it. They've responded to Washington's pressure not like a victim, but like a major player, launching this incredibly robust strategy to forge its own path in technology. And China's response has been super systematic. You can really break it down into three moves. First, they threw up regulatory hurdles. They hit Nvidia with a national security review and started claiming its chips had backdoor safety risks. Second, they just changed the rules of the game. They created new government buying standards that give up to a 20% preference for homegrown Chinese tech. And third, they went for the jugular, the supply chain itself, restricting exports of crucial materials like gallium and germanium that you absolutely need to make semiconductors. And look, this really highlights the potential blowback from US policy. You don't have to take my word for it. Listen to Nvidia's own CEO, Jensen Huang. He's basically arguing that far from stopping China, these restrictions are actually forcing it to innovate faster, creating powerful domestic competitors while really hurting American companies. And believe me, China is putting its money where its mouth is. This number, $47.5 billion, that's the size of its state-run semiconductor investment fund for 2024, for 1 year. It's a massive, state-driven fire hose of cash pointed at one single goal, achieving technological independence and breaking its reliance on the West. So, all of this geopolitical turmoil, this pressure cooker environment, it has created the perfect storm for a new powerhouse to emerge, a truly formidable rival that is the living embodiment of China's push for self-reliance, Huawei. Okay, so let's put them head to head. I mean, look at the specs. On paper, Nvidia's H20 is still clearly the superior chip. Better performance, more memory, a more advanced manufacturing process. But here is the absolutely crucial point. In a market where Nvidia's best chips are banned, Huawei's Ascend 910C is more than good enough for a ton of AI tasks. It's become an incredibly viable domestic alternative. And you can already see the real-world impact of this shift. This isn't some theoretical threat in the future. We're talking about Nvidia's market share in China dropping by 12 points in a single year. And that lost ground, it's being snapped up by domestic players, with Huawei leading the charge. And make no mistake, Huawei is not just playing defense. They are on the attack. Their roadmap is basically a full-scale assault on Nvidia's dominance. They're developing a new chip, the 190D, with the explicit goal of outperforming Nvidia's flagship. And maybe even more importantly, they are building an entire software ecosystem from scratch to challenge CUDA, which is the secret sauce, the moat that gives Nvidia its power. They're planning to ship almost 1 million chips next year and are already locking in huge orders from giants like ByteDance. They are building a fortress in their home market. Okay, so let's just zoom all the way out. What does this all mean? This fight isn't just about one company's quarterly earnings report. It's about the fundamental fracturing of the entire global tech landscape. It's pushing us toward a very, very different future. This is the ultimate question, isn't it? This intense rivalry between the US and China, it's driving us headfirst into a scenario that people are now calling the dual AI world. So what is the dual AI world? Well, think of it like this. For decades, we've had one globalized tech industry. This is a future where that industry splits right down the middle. You'll have one sphere, led by the US, with its own tech, its own supply chains, its own rules. And then you'll have another, totally separate and competing sphere, led by China, with its own standards and its own homegrown champions. But of course, a fracture like this is never clean. The reality on the ground is messy. Even with all the official bans, there is a thriving black market in China for smuggled high-end Nvidia chips. And they're selling for double their list price. It just goes to show you that the demand for top-tier tech is still there, but it also really highlights the limits and the unintended consequences of these policies. And that's the final critical question I want to leave you with. For decades, we all just assumed there was this single global race for tech supremacy. But as the world splits into these two competing ecosystems, it forces us to ask a really fundamental question. In a fractured world, is it even possible for one country or one company to be the undisputed leader of the AI revolution? The answer to that is going to define the entire next era of technology.